Right now, Europe is in the middle of a migrant crisis, and due to the nature of the countries from which these people are coming from, these countries that are rife with terrorism, and also due to the fact that it's almost impossible to properly vet a majority of the people that come through, combined with the fact that the United Nations uh, admits that the majority of the people that actually wind up coming through are military-aged men. Interpol admits that the vast majority of the passports are, completely faked, um, and also you've got an assimilation process in many parts of Europe that are taking in these large portions of migrants. It's been like 5 million migrants in the last couple of years. Their assimilation process doesn't work very well. And because of this, what happens is, unfortunately, you've got a lot of terror attacks that wind up happening in these different European countries. The latest of which was the bombing in Manchester last week. And since that event took place, it seems like there's a possibility that the terrorist, the guy who was a suicide bomber, essentially, that he may have actually been part of a larger terrorist network. So this is from The Independent. Manchester bombing. 3 men released without charge as investigation into terror attack continues. Greater Manchester Police said 11 suspects remain in custody as part of the probe into the suicide bombing that killed 22 victims. 2 men aged 20 and 24 from the Fallowfield area and a 37-year-old man from the Blackley area have been released. Detective Chief Superintendent Russ Jackson, head of the Northwest Counterterrorism Unit, said the release of further suspects, quote, can be expected. We still have a number of people in custody, and we will be seeking to extend the custody of some of them as we work to understand what has gone on, whether Salman Abedi was helped, he added. There has been huge progress made over the week, and the speed of the inquiry remains the same. It will be a long investigation, and it will take considerable time before we fully understand what has happened. So you initially had 14 people that wound up getting rounded up as potential suspects in a terror plot, and some of these people have now been released. And the Manchester bombing, of course, was at a Ariana Grande concert where there was mainly young girls attending. One of the victims, unfortunately, was only 8 years old, and it just goes to show the truly despicable nature of the ideology of radical Islam. That they would be willing to do something this horrendous. And it speaks to the larger issue of these attacks becoming more and more frequent, and of course what you see time and time again, instead of actually looking for the motive and condemning it, which is radical ideology, instead what winds up happening is the authorities and the media, the governments of these various countries, they wind up actually saying that it is the fault of people who are not essentially nice enough to Muslims, which is completely ridiculous. It's completely absurd. It's the narrative that happens time and time again. Essentially apologizing, essentially acting as apologists for the radical ideology that actually was behind these events in the first place. And what that winds up doing is it helps to create an environment where they're going to be more likely to happen again. And it's very unfortunate, it's very concerning. Investigators have been attempting to piece together Abadi's movements between when he arrived back in Manchester from Libya on the 18th of May and the bombing 4 days later. So you've got this guy actually going back and forth from Libya and getting radicalized in the process. The origin of the bomb, believed to have been used homemade TATP explosives employed by ISIS in the Paris and Brussels attack, is of particular concern. The Independent revealed last week that bomb-making materials were found during police searches, prompting concern over the potential construction of other devices. Abadi's former landlord said a flat in Blackley had smelled of chemicals, telling investigators the suspected ISIS supporter told him he was, quote, flying abroad 6 weeks ago when he flew to Libya. The 22-year-old had a, quote, relatively minor criminal record as a teenager when he was linked to gangs, smoking cannabis, and drank, but he was not known to police for holding extremist views. Not known to police, but then it goes on. He appeared on police logs in 2012 over offensive theft, receiving stolen goods, and assault, and was, and this is important, known to MI5, which has launched an internal review amid reports it was warned about Abadi's plans. And of course, they almost certainly, were aware of the fact that he was going back and forth to Libya and actually being radicalized. There's some reports that say that he actually fought at one point in the Syrian civil war. So this is a guy who was potentially working side by side with ISIS, actually getting trained by ISIS to, make the nail bomb that he wound up using, and learning different, radicalized techniques and whatever it is that you go through to become an ISIS soldier nowadays. And almost certainly that, this was known, he was on the radar, and they didn't do anything about it. They didn't do anything about it, and, one of the reasons, potentially, that they didn't actually intervene beforehand, even though they probably knew that he is being radicalized and moving back and forth, even the mosque he attended, was helping to radicalize him, reportedly. And as it is time and time again, and they don't actually do anything about it because, of course, they don't want to be considered racist. And it's similar to what you saw with the shooting in San Bernardino, where the FBI wanted to intervene. Certain FBI agents wanted to intervene, but they were told that they would be basically, slapped with a lawsuit if they, a discrimination lawsuit if they actually went through with it. So they didn't, and then people wound up getting killed. And unfortunately, you see this unfortunate trend quite frequently. Abadi had been reported to the counter-terror hotline and banned from a local mosque, but was not known to prevent the government's voluntary counter-radicalization scheme. Among the suspects still in custody are some of Abadi's friends and relatives, and a Libyan trainee pilot arrested in Shoreham by Sea. It is understood the number of people considered previously by counter-terror teams runs to around 20,000, in addition to 3,000 individuals flagged up as part of 500 live investigations currently being pursued. 500 live investigations. And again, you've had over 5 million just in the last few years of migrants, mostly economic migrants. A lot of them aren't even actually refugees. And in some cases, you've actually got ISIS actually footing the bill, paying the human traffickers basically to get people across into Italy and other areas. I mean, it's a total scandal, and what winds up happening because of this whole process is you get a ton of radicalized individuals, and sometimes, groups that form together that, form different terror plots. And unfortunately, you have a lot of people that wind up getting killed time and time and time again because of these Islamic extremists, and 500 investigations going on. I mean, that is just absolutely insane. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, after this event came out, said that they increased the threat level, the terrorism threat level, from critical to imminent, as high as it, I mean, probably as high as it gets, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but doesn't get much more serious than imminent. So she said that it's very likely that another attack is going to be happening in the near future. Obviously, hopefully that doesn't happen. And it's gonna be, just a waiting game at this point to see if the other 11 individuals that remain in custody, were involved in the plot in any way, shape, or form. But hopefully in the future we can actually be willing to not let political correctness get people killed, because it's a very sad, very unfortunate trend. And to segue into other news regarding the Manchester bombing, there was a leak of information about the bombing that apparently could have been by some people within the Trump administration, some people within the United States government. No surprise there, seeing as our government has been leaking like a sieve ever since Trump took office. This is from the Daily Mail. Quote, "It's darn close to treason. John Kelly condemns information leaks as totally unacceptable after deadly Manchester bombing." Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly criticized the information leaks after the Manchester bombing, calling them darn close to treason. Pictures from the scene were published by the New York Times, and the name of the suspected attacker was also leaked after Monday's attack on an Ariana Grande concert. Kelly condemned the leaked information Sunday, saying British Prime Minister Theresa May had the right to be frustrated. Quote, "I don't know where the leak came from, but I will tell you this, as I always do in cases like this, I immediately called my counterpart in the UK, Kelly told me at the press on Sunday. She immediately brought this topic up, and if it came from the United States, it's totally unacceptable. And I don't know why people do these kind of things, but it's borderline, if not over the line, treason." The UK counterterrorism police briefly stopped sharing information with US officials after the Times published the information. May raised concerns with US President Donald Trump at a NATO summit in Brussels on Thursday, telling him intelligence shared between the two countries had to remain secure. Trump pledged to get to the bottom of the leaks and tweeted Sunday saying British Prime Minister May was very angry that the info the UK gave to the US about Manchester was leaked, gave me full details. On the Sunday morning TV show, Kelly added, quote, "When you leak the kind of information that it seems to be routinely leaked, high level of classification, I think it's darn close to treason." And almost certainly it is. I mean, you've had leaks of, you've had people that were unmasked, like Michael Flynn, with his conversations with the Russian ambassador. Already, it's questionable, very questionable, if the unmasking should have taken place in the first place. But then, no doubt, the leaking is, of course, completely illegal. So, whoever did this, regardless of if it's actually treason or not, it's absolutely a felony. And I think it should be a priority of the administration, which it seems like it is, to find out where these leaks are coming from and prevent them. Of course, the government is basically still filled with Obama holdovers. You've got the top two people at the agencies, and everything below that is still, for the most part, Obama people. I think it's like 3,000 different positions that need to be filled. So until that really starts happening, you're probably not going to be seeing the leaks stopping anytime soon, unless they can actually identify some of the leakers. And hopefully that can happen, because it is definitely a problem when you've got people within the deep state, the permanent government, basically the intelligence communities, that are leaking, classified information to the media in an effort to undermine the sitting president of the United States. Some would call that a soft coup, an overthrow of the government from within, and it is definitely something to be very, very concerned about, because, especially because you have the media and the Democrat establishment that are still pushing the Russian narrative, even though it continues to fall apart. And they are trying to push for impeachment. In many cases, they're calling for impeachment because of the quote-unquote Russian collusion narrative, even though there is zero evidence of any sort of crime whatsoever by anybody. Nobody that has actually looked at the transcripts and the information that's available in the intelligence communities have come out and said that there's any evidence of collusion. None of them, including all the Democrats. So it's time for them to, put up or shut up on the Russian narrative. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. They're going to continue to try to drag it out as long as they can, and sort of make it this cloud around the administration. But hopefully what can happen with Robert Mueller being placed as the head of this special counsel, the independent counsel for the Russia probe, hopefully they can use that as a way to distract away from the constant barrage by the media and the Democrats about supposed collusion. Because now they can just say, well, look, there's an independent investigation going on, an independent counsel looking into this. They're going to do their investigation, and if they come up with something, then we'll address it from there. But until then, let's move on. Because unfortunately, this is causing a roadblock to getting tax reform through, getting healthcare fixed, actually moving forward on these different issues that are actually going to benefit the country. And we'll see if some people actually wind up getting called out. Hopefully they do, and hopefully they actually wind up facing some serious consequences for this, because this is something that should not be taken lightly. Absolutely. And it's good to see that the Secretary of the Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly is actually taking it very seriously. I know the Attorney General is taking it very seriously, and the President obviously is taking it very seriously. So we will continue to look into that as it develops. And now, speaking of people that need to be removed, as I was talking about the Obama holdovers that are left, there is the potential of a White House shakeup of some key players in the very near future. This is from Politico. Trump communication director resigns as larger personal shakeup looms. Mike Dubke, I may have butchered that, President Donald Trump's communication director, has resigned as Trump considers a larger personnel shakeup to confront the growing scandals weighing down his administration. The veteran GOP strategist resigned in a private meeting with the president on May 18th, and Trump accepted immediately. Dubke said in an interview, adding that he offered to stay through the president's first foreign trip to ensure there was a smooth transition as he exited. Dubke, who spoke with Politico as he drove into the White House early Tuesday morning, said he expects to go back to BlackRock Group, his communications and public affairs firm. The White House has not announced a successor for Dubke, but it's unclear when exactly his last day will be. Axios first reported the news of his departure. And that is probably going to be a good move, because his communications team has not been able to adequately express what the president's agenda actually is, and the sort of things that he would actually want expressed. Because again, I mean, you've got a media, you look at the press briefings with Sean Spicer, those things are just ridiculous. It's basically, Sean Spicer's a bloody piece of meat in a pool of piranhas is basically what it boils down to. And, the poor guy just gets ripped up every single time he goes up there. It's just they basically collude together to try to ask trip-up questions and gotcha questions, and they never actually care to talk about things that are going to benefit the American public. It's all about trying to be that star reporter that gives the gotcha question to Sean Spicer and is able to trip him up, because again, the media has the intent of completely derailing this presidency, because they, I guess, get ratings from it, and also in many ways they're probably still reeling from the historic loss. I mean, because the vast majority of them supported Hillary Clinton, and I mean, they said that some of them were saying she had like an 80-90% chance to win. I mean, it was just absurd. I mean, the polls were just way off in many cases. So I'm sure they're quite embarrassed about that. So they've got a bit of personal stake in actually taking him down. And of course, President Trump has been very vocal about his distaste for the quote unquote fake news. So there's definitely a vested interest there to take this president down in multiple ways, and they definitely are on full display. The media are, with their vitriolic hatred. And now more news regarding the potential shakeup from InfoWars. Will Trump save himself with White House shakeup? Both the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post said that experienced D.C. political hand David Urban, former chief of staff to Senator Arlene Specter, and now a Washington lobbyist known for his quiet and low-key efficiency, will be tapped for the White House staff in some capacity in the near future. Urban, from Aliquippa, may have said that wrong, Pennsylvania, is a former altar boy, son of a Union card-carrying steel worker, graduate of West Point, who served his country on both fields of battle and in the U.S. Congress. President Trump will be wise to utilize Urban's talent, a point that the New York Times even made, claiming that Urban was, quote, going in. With Urban, we can expect loyalty and competence, the two things he desperately needs as Obama holdovers who continue to populate the government work to leak to undermine his presidency. So one of the key figures that needs to go, in my point of view, and a big reason we've got many of the issues that we're facing due to the Obama holdovers, is because of Reince Priebus. And that's his chief of staff right now. That's the guy who's basically in charge of choosing the people, essentially, that would fill these various positions. And he is a total establishment, Paul Ryan Lackey, basically. And he always goes for, establishment swamp creatures, basically. Trump's trying to drain the swamp, right? Well, he's picking swamp creatures. So, it's causing, because Trump obviously isn't wanting any of these people, and it's been word for quite a while that he's been not exactly thrilled with Reince Priebus. But it's caused a stalemate, is the point. It's caused a stalemate in the government, which is why you've got 3,000 Obama holdovers in all these different agencies. And it's a big, big problem. So hopefully somebody like this guy, like Urban, would actually be a good pick for the chief of staff. But that's a key position, in my point of view, that Trump needs to fill with somebody other than total rhino, Paul Ryan, establishment lackey, like Reince Priebus. I have no idea why he chose that guy in the first place. I mean, I guess keep your enemies close, maybe, but that didn't seem to work out too well, because that guy was actually in a very key position that wound up causing a stalemate that just left an army of Obama people. So that did not work out too well. That was definitely a mistake to have that guy on in the first place, in my point of view. But there has been some good news. You know, there's some people in the Trump administration that are fairly liberal. I mean, he's definitely hasn't stacked his administration with a bunch of conservatives. You know, you've got people like his financial advisor, Gary Cohn, who is, you know, openly very liberal, and many other people around him. I mean, obviously Jared Kushner, you know, his son-in-law is very liberal. His, you know, daughter Ivanka is very liberal, you know, and they, you know, for better or worse, have quite a bit of influence on him in many ways. But there was definitely a good sign that there may be some very conservative, very pro-Trump people coming on board into the administration, which is something I think is absolutely critical at this point. This is from the Washington Free Beacon. Sheriff David Clarke says he's joining DHS. The Trump administration tapped Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke to serve as Assistant Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security for partnership and engagement. Clarke, a tough-talking conservative firebrand recognized by his penchant for cowboy hats, announced the appointment during an interview with a local Wisconsin radio station Wednesday afternoon, saying, quote, "I'm both honored and humbled to be appointed to the position by DHS Secretary John Kelly, working for the Trump administration in this position," Clarke told WISN Milwaukee. And Sheriff Clarke is, you know, somebody who has definitely been somebody who is very pro-Trump. You know, he definitely campaigned for him, you know, in many ways, and he was definitely very vocal about his support for him. You know, it wasn't a never-Trumper by any means. So it's definitely good, in my point of view, that he's being a part of the administration. And hopefully we can start seeing more people in that sort of vein being brought on board, especially if we can get a new chief of staff in there and really start filling a bunch of these vacant positions. And then, of course, we've got the ever-continuing saga of Russian fake news, and this is from the New York Times. No surprise there. Investigation turns to Kushner's motives in meeting with a Putin ally. So there's a bunch of hubbub going on right now because supposedly Jared Kushner was trying to set up some secret back channel to talk with Vladimir Putin. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, was looking for a direct line to President Vladimir Putin of Russia. A search that in mid-December found him in a room with a Russian banker whose financial institution was deeply intertwined with Russian intelligence and remains under sanction by the United States. Federal and congressional investigators are now examining what exactly Mr. Kushner and the Russian banker Sergei N. Gorkov wanted from each other. The banker is a close associate of Mr. Putin, but he has not been known to play a diplomatic role for the Russian leader. That has raised questions about why he was meeting with Mr. Kushner at a crucial moment in the presidential transition, according to current and former officials familiar with the investigations. The New York Times first reported the meeting between Mr. Kushner and Mr. Gorkov in March, but the White House at the time did not explain its aim. That article quoted a White House spokesman, Hope Hicks, who said that the meeting came at the request of the Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei I. Kislyak, with whom Mr. Kushner had met earlier in December at Trump Tower to discuss opening a communications channel with Russian officials during the presidential transition. But the half-hour meeting with Mr. Gorkov since has come under increasing scrutiny. The current and former American officials now say it may have been part of an effort by Mr. Kushner to establish a direct line to Mr. Putin outside established diplomatic channels. So Democrats in the media instantly came out and said that this is obvious, you know, this is nefarious, this is proof of collusion, and they said that it's unprecedented that, you know, there's ever been a back channel communications to different, you know, countries that bypass the normal, you know, means of communications, a direct line, in other words. Which is a total lie, basically, as usual. Basically, every president, I mean, you look it up, every president in the last 100 years has had a direct line of communications to one or more, you know, foreign nations. Obama, in the transition period, before he was even president, he actually created a direct line of communications with the Mullah, I believe, or whatever the heck his name is, in Iran. And that was part of setting up the Iran deal. So this I mean, and if you want to talk about something that's shady and possibly kind of nefarious, I would say I'm not saying Russia's good, but I would say Iran is possibly more of a direct national threat to us, honestly. And you had President Obama even doing it, and they say that no president has done it. They say it's completely unprecedented. It's just a total lie. It's an absolute total lie. It's actually, for better or worse, pretty normal, quite normal for presidents to set up established lines of communications with different foreign counterparts. So it's not unprecedented in any way, shape, or form, and it would not be illegal in any way for them to do this. That's not saying that it's a good idea or that it was handled properly, by the way. It seems that the way Jared Kushner was handling it was pretty amateurish, which I think lends to the idea that he probably is not fit to be in the position that he's at. I don't think he should be a top advisor to the president. I just don't. Not only is he, very liberal in his views, he's never really been in government, and he's actually being put in charge of some pretty important affairs in a lot of ways. So I think that's a mistake. I think it would be a good idea for him to step down and have somebody else put in that position, somebody with more actual experience in the government, experience with foreign policy and all these other things. But the bottom line is, it wouldn't have been illegal or unprecedented to set up this back channel. And what is definitely worth noting is that they say that this meeting with Kushner between the Russians was happening during the transition period, after President Trump had been elected. So how does it make sense that the Russians were attempting to help Trump? If Trump was colluding with the Russians, I thought that was during the campaign to help him win the election. I thought that was the whole story of the Democrats, but supposedly Kushner is trying to set up the back channel of communication after the election. So it just doesn't seem to make sense even from that standpoint, even if you do believe that there is potential collusion, which obviously I don't. There's zero evidence for that, obviously. But stories like this continue to get pushed out, and it continues to discredit the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and all these other publications that continue to push this kind of nonsense, really, this garbage, really fake news in a lot of ways, simply because they're not putting it in the proper context. The story that they're saying may be potentially true, but they're portraying it like it's something nefarious when it's absolutely not, and it's provably so. So, shame on the New York Times for, basically pushing out propaganda, but that's about all it's good for nowadays, unfortunately. And the media, obviously, is completely biased against Trump. You see the constant attacks against him and his administration 24/7, and you never really see any sort of positive coverage. And I think this was highlighted very, vividly on Memorial Day. And here's why. This is from the Daily Wire. On Memorial Day, Trump does something that would have put Obama on every front page. President Trump on Monday marked his first Memorial Day as Commander-in-Chief, heading to Arlington National Cemetery through the throngs of motorcycles participating in Rolling Thunder to place a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And one thing about Trump is, it feels very genuine, his affection towards the military. You can tell that he really cares about the military, and he absolutely spent, his first Memorial Day the way a president should, actually honoring the troops which in many ways is a total contrast from the Obama administration, who just really didn't seem like he liked the troops very much or supported the military very much. He actually seemed kind of uncomfortable about the military and American military strength, and he definitely had a completely different approach towards treating the military than the current president, which obviously I think Trump is doing, what a president just ought to do, is actually, honor the military as much as you possibly can, especially on a day like Memorial Day. And it goes on, the large audience packed into the cemetery's amphitheater cheered when Trump was introduced, and the president delivered a powerful tribute to America's fallen service members, calling them angels sent to us by God. Quote, to every Gold Star family, God is with you, and your loved ones are with him, Trump said. They died in war so that we could live in peace. Every time you see the sun rise over this blessed land, please know your brave sons and daughters pushed away the night and delivered for us all that great and glorious dawn. So really, it was a great speech. It was a wonderful speech. That was definitely one of the highlight parts of it, for sure. But it was a wonderful speech. He honored a handful of different servicemen who had given their lives. He honored the families of the different servicemen that have given their lives, and of the different veterans that were there. And it was really really quite a wonderful speech, and quite a wonderful just event altogether to honor the troops. And of course, the media didn't really want to have anything to do with it. Of course, you wouldn't know that Trump did that if you looked at the top newspapers in the country. In fact, you wouldn't even know that Monday was Memorial Day, or that nearly every town across the United States held a parade to honor America's troops. The New York Times didn't have anything on its front page about Memorial Day. It used a small teaser box at the bottom left-hand corner to tout a story about, quote, a soccer star's farewell to AS Roma, whatever that is. Not a word or picture dedicated to America's military branches and their sacrifice. The Washington Post front page was full of anti-Trump stories, quote, serving intelligence to Trump in small bites, and, quote, budget would cut civil rights position, to name a few. And the main art showed a factory in Kentucky, not Trump or America's veterans. The paper, whose motto is, quote, democracy dies in darkness, did feature one tiny picture at the bottom of the page with a referral to the Metro page for a story about Memorial Day, but no mention or photo of Trump. Only USA Today, among the country's biggest papers, featured a shot of Trump laying the wreath with a reference to an inside story and more pictures. But here's the shot that former President Barack Obama, if President Barack Obama had done it, would have put him on every front page across the country. Since it was Trump, though, the country's liberal papers decided not to print it. And it was a picture of President Trump hugging the son of a fallen Marine, of a Marine who died in combat. He actually didn't die in combat, he died in a training accident. But it was a really touching photo. It was a really heartwarming photo, for sure. I mean, it was, you could tell there was some real genuineness there, and it was just an amazing photo. A perfect highlight of that event. Of Trump's presence there, and what it meant to people. But of course, the media didn't want anything to do with it. The boy's name is Christian Jacobs, 6 years old, and he's dressed like a Marine because his father, the Marine Sergeant Christopher Jacobs, was killed during a training accident in California in 2011. A great picture of America's president on Memorial Day, and every newspaper that didn't run it for purely partisan reasons ought to be ashamed. And they really should, because it's something that I think should be able to unify everybody. I mean, I can understand not supporting certain wars, and certainly I don't. I don't support certain military intervention, but to not be able to support the troops in general, or in particular the troops that actually, the soldiers that were willing to give their lives, that actually gave their lives for our country to be free, it's pretty despicable, in my view. And speaking of despicable, I want to move on to the last story for the day. By far, one of the most despicable things that Hollywood has produced in quite a while, and that's definitely saying something. This is from the Daily Mail. Quote, "I went too far. Kathy Griffin apologizes for posting a video of Trump's severed head on social media after Secret Service suggests she will be investigated for threatening the president." Kathy Griffin has apologized for posting a video of President Trump's severed head after furious backlash, including from Chelsea Clinton. And the Secret Service tweeted suggesting she may be investigated over the stunt. The controversial comedian tweeted, "I am sorry, I went too far, I was wrong," after Griffin was seen slowly raising Trump's head during a photo shoot with infamous photographer Tyler Shields. She also posted a video promising to remove the offending image. But the apology was not enough to stop an army of critics, both Trump supporters and Democrats, from attacking Griffin on social media for the outrageous stunt. Meanwhile, the Secret Service, while not citing the video or image, chose this tone to remind its followers on Twitter that the agency monitors social media and took any threats against the president very seriously. That is indeed their job to do so. And this, this is a trend that's been going on in Hollywood, ever since Trump got elected. You had, of course, Madonna, come out and say that she's been thinking awfully a lot about blowing up the White House. You had, Snoop Dogg did his rap video where he basically shot with a toy gun a Donald Trump clown lookalike, pretty much. And, you've just had complete vitriolic hatred from all of Hollywood against Trump. And, you've even had some individuals, I think it was at the Screen Actors Guild Awards or some crap like that, or something like that. One of those award shows. I don't watch any of them. The guy from Stranger Things, I think, one of the main guys, he was basically going out and saying Trump supporters are Nazis, so run around and punch Nazis in the face. You just got violence against Trump and Trump supporters is just a constant, there's just a constant flow of it from the left. So, it's definitely not necessarily a surprise that something like this would happen, but it really just goes to show the true, absolute, total hatred for Donald Trump. You had this lady, Kathy Griffin, whatever, a D-rate comedian, quote-unquote comedian, just standing there holding a mock severed head of Donald Trump with just the most blank, crazed, serial killer look in her eyes that I've ever seen. It was bone-chilling. And it wasn't funny, and this could have been an ISIS propaganda video, basically, and when you've got a climate of all of the violence that is being aimed towards Trump supporters and towards Trump himself, and you've got different instances. There was a guy just recently who got arrested with guns and ammo at a Trump hotel. During the campaign, there was already a British guy who attempted to take a police officer's gun and shoot Donald Trump. You've got this constant, drumbeat from the left, the Democrats, Hollywood, that Donald Trump is this evil, vile, horrible, racist, bigoted, sexist, xenophobic Nazi, that deserves to die, according to Kathy Griffin. And there's a real chance that it could incite some real violence. And look, this lady's going to get investigated for it, but the Secret Service is probably going to interview her. She's not going to wind up going to jail over this. That's just not going to happen. They're not going to be able to prove that Kathy Griffin was actually, going to attempt to chop the president's head off. That's just not going to happen. But what could happen is this could incite real violence from actual nut jobs running around, not just Hollywood nut jobs, because they don't actually have the balls to actually ever do anything like that. They just like to run around and act, talk tough all day. But it's totally irresponsible, completely ridiculous. And I gotta say, CNN actually fired her. So, I guess I'll give them props for it. Of course they waited. They waited like 24 hours. They wanted to see if it was going to blow over, but it didn't. A lot of people freaked out about it. As the story said, even Chelsea Clinton and Keith Olbermann, for crying out loud, came out and said that this was just going too far. So if you've got Keith Olbermann telling you to calm down, you've definitely jumped the shark. So just absolute horrific, vile, just nastiness coming from people on the left. She got, canned from her CNN gig, and she's been basically criticized by virtually everybody. So that's a good thing. I mean, that's, better than the sort of apologists that, you always see with all the other celebrities that come out and, just have this hateful, violent rhetoric and imagery and what have you. So it's good to see some actual backlash happening, because I think people are, in many ways, starting to get sick of it. And at least I hope they are, because I know I sure as heck am. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you did. Please subscribe and leave me a comment, and let me know if there's any topics you'd like me to talk about or anything like that, or if you just want to chime in, that's cool too. I will have the audio version of this on SoundCloud, and you can follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook, and I will have the links for all that in the description. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and may the force be with you.